You know, Dick didn't have a biological son, and I know sometimes he would refer to a lot of his players as his adopted sons over the years, but you were truly a special person to him. And, you know, maybe you could talk a little bit about what Dick meant to you and how tough the last 10, 12 months have been on you and Kim and Chris and everyone with the family.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. It was difficult. You know, Coach is a very proud man, and to see him sort of in decline physically, you know, going through the procedures. He had back surgery, and then after he was recovering from back surgery was when he had a stroke. And from that point on, which was his last fall, it's sort of been a roller coaster up and down. He certainly had some good days, and he rallied, and we were able to have a really special night for him for a court dedication at Whitehall. And he also made it out a couple of times up to Pot's Hot Dog Shop, up to Mark Mazziotti, which was a place that he was quite fond of. And we had him out a couple times, and certainly I saw him a whole lot, but it was day by day. And certainly at the end, knowing Coach as well as I knew Coach, it was certainly time. But as difficult as it was, we have some great memories. I've known Coach for probably the better part of 25 years, and I loved him like a father. I certainly did.
For people who's never at Coach's home, he had an entire living room, 4 walls covered in newspapers with awards, honors, achievements, a Coach of the Year, trophies, medals. And yet, you know, beneath that gruff exterior, when you'd ask him, and when I would get a chance to ask him about what he was most proud of or what he really cared about, it always came back to relationships he had with people. He was proud of former students that would go on and have great athletic success, or people who had success in the military, or people who were involved in special projects. It always seemed to come back to relationships with Coach.
Oh,
Go ahead.
That's absolutely true. That room that you spoke of was indeed a shrine. It was a shrine to him, and also he had quite a bit of Notre Dame and Yankee memorabilia in there, which was pretty neat to see. And it was the only place where he showed any of those accomplishments. He was so very humble and had such humility that he would always shun any type of accolades or any type of attention. However, in that room, that was his shrine and that was his room. And getting back to your original question, he was so proud of all those guys that he had coached and those relationships that he had formed through coaching over the years. You really could see a twinkle in his eye and how excited he would get when he would see those former players. You know, one thing I'd like to make note of as well is he was a remarkable teacher. He was an English teacher, which he was very proud of, and he could quote Macbeth, and he could correct anyone's grammar, and he was a tremendous writer and skilled writer, and he was probably as proud of his job as a teacher and teaching English as he was the accomplishments that he had gained such notoriety for in basketball.
Yeah, Corey, hi, Joe Craig here. You know, Dick was a kind of a special guy. I got to know Dick mostly as an athletic director later on. And when I came in as an AD, Dick was at Whitehall, and he kind of took me under his wing. And I tell you, I learned an awful lot from him. He was just what a guy to sit and talk with. One thing a lot of people don't realize, he had a great sense of humor and in his own kind of a dry way. Tell me a little bit about some situations where you know that was true.
He was tremendously witty, and it was certainly a biting and a sarcastic wit that he had. And if you didn't know him well, you could certainly misinterpret that. I know it took me some time till I got accustomed to it, until I felt comfortable being able to trade some barbs with him. But that took me certainly some time. He was just a really unique individual, and it's hard to put into words the type of person he was, because he was so many things to so many different people. But you're right, in terms of his ability to teach, he would always put you in a position in which you were forced to teach yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I always remember the very first, I used to travel with him when I was a freshman coach at Whitehall, and I would go and keep stats with Gary and Coach oftentimes. And the very first time I went with him, you know, I went and keeping stats, and I'm casually watching the game. I'll never forget, we got back into the car, and his first question that he said to me is, well, what did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, and you know, it was at that point where I realized I'm not just sitting here and enjoying the game anymore. I had to learn. I had to try to tell him what I was learning there, you know, and he was a tremendous teacher in that regard.
And he was a great teacher. I know one experience, my son's a head coach down in Virginia, and when the day he got the job, he asked me, my son, asked me if I could arrange for him to sit down with Mr. Tracy to talk a little bit about the Whitehall matchup zone and all that. And I'll never forget Dick meeting with him at City View Diner on 7th Street. And he sat with my son for almost 3.5 hours and gave him a seminar on that defense. And that's, my son to this day uses that down at Fairfax, Virginia. That's the kind of guy Dick was, you know.
He had done that countless times with many coaches. Coaches would call him up and they would pick his brain. Certainly we would go down there, and when he taught the matchup zone and explained the matchup zone, it wasn't the matchup zone, it was the conviction in which he taught the matchup zone and how passionate he was about it. There was never a moment of hesitation in terms of how you should match certain things, who should be guarding whom, whatever the case may be. And many coaches would call on him and ask for advice and counsel like that. You know, the thing is with the match, that's something that needs to be practiced and fostered almost every day, and that's what he would always come back to me and say, well, they'll use it for a week and then they'll go back to playing man or playing 2-3.
Well, you know, and he was just such a good teacher, and when he was a great judge of talent, and I didn't mean just basketball talent. He could look at another coach or another AD, and he would be so, you know, he'd be right there and paying attention and matter of fact, being polite, talking to the guy. And then after it was over, he'd say to me things like, that guy's a phony, you know. And Dick knew.
He could see through people.
Oh,
there's no question about that.
He was a master on it. He really
was.
was.
In terms of teaching, you know, probably one of my, so many memories, but some of my fondest memories are these last few years. After Mary had passed away and after he was done broadcasting, he would be in our gym almost on a daily basis, and he would just sit in the corner. You know, very rarely would he interact or anything like that. I know Jeff Jones, who's also very close with him, as well as myself. We constantly say, you know, come out here, tell us, you know, what do you think? Tell these guys. And once in a while, maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, he would come out, and then he would hold court. And, you know, just to see the looks on the kids' faces when he'd be talking, he sounded like a lunatic at times, you know, and the way that he spoke was the same way that he spoke in the late 70s and the early 80s to these guys, but boy, did he have their attention. And there, at Whitehall especially, there's a certain degree of respect for Coach Tracy that I know those kids certainly were listening very carefully to every word that he had to say.
He had that kind of respect everywhere. You know, Lehigh Valley's had some great coaches with Dickie Schmidt and John Dunmoyer, and you can go down the list from Easton, Stan Sutphin, and up and down. But I'll tell you what, Dick Tracy was as good, if not better, than any coach I ever saw in coaching basketball.
You could name many different coaches, and certainly, you know, everybody has different opinions and biases and things like that, but there is only one Dick Tracy, and in my mind, what I learned from him about basketball and more importantly about life are the most valuable lessons I've learned in my lifetime.
But I'll tell you what, the last time I saw him, I teased him because he still had a book of mine about Archie Bunker that I loaned him and I never got it back.
Still swears you never gave it to him. I will defend Coach. He swears you never did that.
Yeah, I think I have it, Joe.
All right, Corey.
Corey, before we let you go, I have to commend the Whitehall School District. I thought they did a great job with the court dedication and that whole ceremony that went on with the court dedication last December. Are there any plans in the works from the Whitehall sports community to honor Coach's memory during the basketball season, the school year, or are you hearing anything to pay tribute to him going forward?
Certainly there will be. There's been discussion about it. I know I can't be thankful enough to Bob Hartman and Jack Corby, our superintendent, as well, for putting that special night together. When I called Bob Hartman on the morning that I learned that he had passed away and you know, talked to him about it and wanted him to share it with the Whitehall community, and he called me back about 10 minutes later and he said, I'm going to offer the gym as the location for the services. Now, anybody who knew Coach knew that he was a deeply religious man, and he certainly would want to have a mass in a church. So that was shot down, and his funeral arrangements were already pre-planned and things like that. But, you know, that was the type of impact that he had on Whitehall. And while I don't know specifics in terms of how we're going to honor him, you know, as Jeff Jones as our head coach, and certainly me being a part of that staff, I know that he'll be featured prominently in this coming basketball season.
I just wanted to take some time to talk about the passing of a longtime colleague and a true Lehigh Valley sports legend yesterday, our own Dick Tracy. For me, he served many roles in my life, someone who young kids in the Whitehall community looked up to as a teacher, administrator, newspaper advisor, athletic director, and an honored veteran. And later for me as a broadcaster, colleague, partner, and good friend. I know there's many ways to describe Dick Tracy and probably many more eloquent ways to say them, but simply he was probably the most unique man that I ever met and taught me a lot, whether it would be in sports, broadcasting, or life in general. And I know many other people learned a lot from him. He was a valuable member of the Lehigh Valley sports community and someone who will be deeply and sadly missed. Our heartfelt condolences and sympathies to everyone associated with his family, a family that extends well beyond the immediate family members. For us and for so many others, he will forever be our coach.